There is a strange frustration that comes with money that most people never quite put into words. It's not just stress, it's not just worry. It's the sense that no matter how hard you try, no matter how responsible you are, you're always slightly behind. Like everyone else got instructions you never received. Most people assume this feeling means they are doing something wrong, that they missed a step, that they lack discipline, that they're not good with money. But that assumption is the first mistake, because the truth is much simpler and much harder to accept. The rules were never explained. Money is not random. It is not chaos. It is not luck. It operates on rules, predictable rules, repeatable rules, rules that quietly reward certain behaviors and quietly punish others. The problem is not that these rules are secret. The problem is that they are never taught in the places where people expect to learn them. School teaches compliance, not leverage. Jobs teach performance, not ownership. Culture teaches consumption, not control. And families often pass down stress without understanding its source. So people grow up believing money is emotional, dangerous, unfair, complicated, something to survive rather than understand. And then adulthood arrives, bills appear, responsibility increases, pressure builds, and people start playing a game they don't understand, using rules they never chose, while blaming themselves for losing. Most people don't realize they're playing a game at all. They believe money is about effort. Work harder, get more. Be responsible, things will work out. Save when you can. Spend when you must. Hope the future is kind. But effort is not the rule. Responsibility is not the rule. Hope is not the rule. Money follows systems. It follows structure. It follows behavior repeated over time. And until you see that, nothing makes sense. This is why two people with the same income can live completely different financial lives. One feels calm, the other feels trapped. One builds options, the other builds stress. The difference is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is alignment with the rules. Most people believe that if they just earned a little more, everything would be fine. And sometimes, briefly, it is. A raise feels like relief. A bonus feels like freedom. For a moment, the pressure lifts, then life expands. Spending rises, commitments grow, comfort creeps in, and soon the money is gone, and the stress returns heavier than before. This is not failure. This is a rule at work, a rule that says money without structure disappears, a rule that says income magnifies behavior, a rule that says relief is temporary without control. But no one explains this. So people keep chasing income, believing the next raise will fix what discipline never addressed. They blame the economy. They blame their job. They blame themselves. And the game continues. The truth is, money does not care how hard you try. It cares how you behave. It responds to patterns, not intentions. And patterns are invisible until you look for them. Most people never do. They live reactively. Bills arrive. They respond. Expenses appear. They adapt. Emergencies happen. They scramble. Life becomes a series of reactions, and money becomes a source of constant noise. This is not because people are irresponsible. It's because reaction is what they were trained for. No one taught them to design. Designing a financial life requires stepping back and asking uncomfortable questions. Questions like, why money seems to disappear no matter how much comes in? Questions like, why stress returns so quickly after relief? Questions like, whether the rules they're living by actually make sense. Most people avoid these questions because they feel heavy, because they challenge identity, because they threaten familiar patterns. But the moment you ask them, something shifts. You begin to see that money is not personal, it is procedural, and procedures can be learned. That realization is where everything starts to change. There's a moment many people remember clearly, even years later. It usually happens on payday. The notification hits your phone. The number looks good, maybe even better than usual. For a few seconds, you feel lighter, safer, capable. You think, okay, we're good. And then, almost immediately, the money starts getting assigned in your head. Rent, utilities, groceries, gas, the credit card. The thing you promised yourself you'd finally pay down. The thing you forgot about that's about to hit. The relief fades before the money even settles. This is where most people get confused. They did what they were told. They earned more. They worked harder. They improved. And yet nothing really changed. So they reach an obvious conclusion. I don't earn enough. That conclusion feels logical. It feels measurable. It gives them something to chase. If I could just make a little more, things would finally stabilize. And sometimes they do make more. A new job, a promotion, a side hustle. Over time, the income goes up, and once again, there's that brief window of relief. A month or two where things feel manageable. Then life adjusts. The apartment gets nicer. The car payment grows. Subscriptions creep in. Convenience replaces patience. Spending rises quietly, not recklessly, just naturally. And before long, the pressure returns, stronger than before. This cycle repeats so often that people stop questioning it. They assume it's normal. They assume everyone lives this way. They assume money is just stressful by nature. But what's actually happening is simpler than it looks. They're breaking a rule they were never taught. The rule of cash flow. Cash flow is not about how much you make. It's about how money moves through your life, where it enters, where it exits, how fast it leaves, and whether anything stays behind. Most people focus on income because it's visible. It's celebrated. It's easy to compare. Cash flow is quiet, boring, invisible unless you look for it. And because no one explains this, people confuse activity with progress. Imagine two people earning the same amount. One feels constantly stressed, the other feels calm. The difference isn't intelligence, it isn't discipline. It's that one understands their cash flow and the other doesn't. The calm person knows exactly what happens to their money the moment it arrives. They've already decided. The stressed person decides in real time, every time. And real-time decisions are emotional. Here's a story that plays out everywhere. Someone gets a raise. They don't change anything intentionally. They don't sit down and redesign their financial system. They just keep living. But life always expands to meet available money. It's not greed, it's gravity. A few more dinners out, a few more conveniences, a subscription here, an upgrade there. None of it feels irresponsible. In fact, it feels earned. Until one day they realize they're more dependent than before. Higher income, higher obligations, higher stress. This isn't a failure of discipline. It's a failure of structure. Money without structure behaves like water without a container. It flows wherever gravity takes it. People who understand cash flow don't rely on restraint. They rely on pre-commitment. They decide where money goes before it arrives, not after. This is why budgeting fails for so many people. Budgeting asks you to remember, to resist, to decide over and over again. It treats money management like a daily battle. Cash flow design treats it like plumbing. The goal isn't to fight money. The goal is to direct it. Think about the person who says, I make good money, but I don't know where it goes. That sentence alone tells you the rule they're missing. Money doesn't disappear. It follows paths. If you don't define the paths, money chooses its own. And money's default path is consumption. This is where the illusion of income becomes dangerous. High income can hide bad cash flow for a long time. It creates the appearance of success while quietly building fragility. That's why some of the most stressed people you'll ever meet earn good money. Their financial life looks impressive from the outside and feels terrifying on the inside. They're one missed paycheck away from panic. Cash flow exposes this. It reveals whether money's working for you or just passing through. There's another story that's just as common, but less talked about. Someone lives very carefully. They avoid risk. They keep expenses low. They pride themselves on being responsible. But they never seem to get ahead. They save a little, then an emergency wipes it out, over and over again. They don't feel reckless. They feel unlucky. What they're missing is not effort, it's margin. Margin is the space between what you earn and what you need. Without margin, every unexpected event becomes a crisis. With margin, problems become inconveniences. Cash flow creates margin, not income alone. And here's the part that surprises people. You can increase margin without earning more. By slowing money down, by keeping it longer, by deciding its job before it arrives. People who understand this don't ask, how can I make more first? They ask, how can I keep more of what already comes in? That question changes behavior immediately. They stop treating extra money as permission to spend. They treat it as an opportunity to stabilize, to build buffers, to reduce future stress. This is why some people seem calm even when their income isn't extraordinary. They've mastered the flow. They don't rely on hope. They rely on predictability. And predictability is incredibly powerful. Because when money becomes predictable, stress drops. When stress drops, decision-making improves. And when decision-making improves, income often rises naturally. But again, no one explains this. People are taught to chase income, not to design flow. So they keep running faster, believing speed is the solution. But speed without direction just leads to exhaustion. The rule of cash flow doesn't care how ambitious you are. It doesn't care how motivated you feel. It only responds to structure. And once you understand that, the game shifts. You stop asking why money feels so stressful. You start asking where it's going. And that question changes everything. Most people don't realize they're following rules until the rules start hurting. Take Mark. Mark is not reckless. He's not irresponsible. He's the kind of person people would describe as doing pretty well. He works full-time, gets decent reviews, and shows up for his family. If you looked at his life from the outside, nothing would seem broken. But every month, without fail, he feels the same quiet panic. Mark remembers the exact day he got his first real raise. He was standing in the break room when his manager told him the number. It wasn't life-changing, but it felt validating. Proof that his effort mattered, that things were moving in the right direction. That night, he and his partner went out to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just dinner. But something shifted after that. Not immediately, gradually. They stopped checking prices at the grocery store. They upgraded their phone plans. They signed up for a couple of subscriptions that made life easier. None of it felt like a decision. It felt like progress. 6 months later, Mark was making more money than he ever had and stressing just as much as before. The problem wasn't spending, it was unconscious spending. Mark never told his money what his job was, so it took the easiest one available, disappearing. The lesson Mark eventually learned, painfully, was that money without intention always finds a way out. Not because it's malicious, because that's what it's designed to do in a consumption-driven world. The first thing that changed Mark's life wasn't a raise, it was a notebook. One Sunday morning, he sat at the kitchen table and did something he had avoided for years. He opened his bank app and went back 30 days, not to judge, not to panic, just to observe. He wrote down 3 things: what came in, what absolutely had to go out, and what quietly leaked away. This is where most people stop listening, because it sounds boring. But this moment, in this exact moment, is where control begins. Mark didn't cut everything. He didn't punish himself. He made one decision, just one. He chose one spending category that didn't actually improve his life and paused it for 30 days. Not forever, 30 days. That decision alone created space. Not just financial space, mental space. Now consider Sarah. Sarah is the opposite of Mark in some ways. She's careful, extremely careful. She doesn't buy impulsively. She tracks expenses loosely. She avoids debt. She does everything she was told to do. And yet, she feels stuck. Sarah's frustration comes from a different place. She isn't drowning. She's treading water. For years, she saves a little. Then something breaks. Her car, her laptop, a medical bill. Every time she makes progress, it resets. Sarah believes the rule is, don't take risks. That safety equals stability. But the rule she was never taught is that safety without leverage leads to stagnation. Sarah's breakthrough didn't come from spending less. It came from asking a different question. Instead of asking, how do I protect what I have? She asked, how do I increase the value I create? She started small, 30 minutes a day, one skill, communication. Not because she wanted to be a salesperson, but because she realized that money moves toward people who can explain value clearly. She practiced asking for things without apologizing. She practiced speaking up in meetings. She practiced negotiating small things, bills, rates, responsibilities. Nothing changed overnight. But 6 months later, Sarah wasn't stuck anymore. Not because she won the lottery, because she changed how money flowed toward her. Then there's Alex. Alex is exhausted. Alex works hard, really hard. Long hours, side gigs, hustle, grind, and somehow still behind. Alex's problem isn't laziness, it's direction. Alex has never slowed down long enough to design a system. Every dollar Alex earns has already been spent in his mind before it arrives. The money is emotionally assigned before it's physically deposited. Alex's turning point came when something unexpected happened. He missed work for a week. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough time to notice how fragile everything felt. That's when Alex realized the rule he was living under, trading time for money forever. So Alex made a small but uncomfortable shift. He carved out 1 hour a day, not to rest, not to scroll, to build something repeatable. At first it felt pointless, slow, unimpressive. But over time, that 1 hour began to produce something his job never did. Leverage. The actionable insight here is simple but uncomfortable. If every dollar you earn requires your presence, your ceiling is low. Leverage doesn't have to mean owning buildings or businesses. It can mean systems, skills, offers, assets that don't reset to zero every morning. Now here's where all three stories intersect. Mark learned to slow money down. Sarah learned to increase value. Alex learned to separate time from income. None of them started with massive change. They started with structure. And this is the part you can apply immediately. You don't need to fix your entire life. You need to stop living in reaction. Start with 1 month, just one. Track everything that moves, not forever. 30 days. Then define your floor, the minimum cost to keep your life functioning. Knowing this number removes fear because it replaces imagination with reality. Then create a buffer, not wealth. Calm. $500 to $1,000 whose only job is to prevent panic. Then pick one skill that increases your leverage and commit to it daily for 90 days. Not 10 skills. 1. Then design your money flow before money arrives. Decide in advance what money does instead of negotiating in the moment. This is how people quietly get ahead, not through dramatic decisions, through boring ones that compound. The rules were never explained because explaining them doesn't sell hype. It sells responsibility. But once you see them, you stop blaming yourself. And once you stop blaming yourself, you can finally change the system you're living inside. And this is only the beginning, because the next rule isn't about money at all. It's about behavior. And behavior is where everything either breaks down or finally starts to work. When you're ready, we'll continue with part 3, the rule of behavior with deeper character arcs, emotional traps, and step-by-step shifts people can actually follow. Behavior is where most people lose the game without realizing it. Not because they don't know better, but because behavior lives deeper than logic. It lives in emotion, habit, and identity. And money follows behavior far more faithfully than it follows plans. Take Daniel. Daniel knows what he should do. He's read articles. He's listened to podcasts. He's even taken notes. He understands budgeting in theory. He understands saving. He understands that impulse spending hurts him, and yet somehow the same patterns keep repeating. Daniel doesn't splurge wildly. His spending happens in moments, after long days, after stressful conversations, after weeks where life feels heavier than usual. He tells himself small rewards help him cope, and in isolation, they do. But over time, those moments stack. Daniel's behavior isn't irrational, it's protective. Spending gives him relief, control, a brief sense of choice when everything else feels demanded of him. And this is where money becomes emotional. People don't spend to buy things. They spend to change how they feel. Until that truth is understood, no spreadsheet will ever work. Daniel's turning point didn't come from a stricter budget. It came from noticing when he spent, not just what he spent. He started recognizing the pattern. Stress first, fatigue second, spending third. So instead of fighting the spending, he changed the trigger. When stress hit, he didn't open an app. He paused. Just 10 minutes. He went for a walk, took a shower, did something that reset his nervous system without costing him money. That pause changed everything. Behavior always follows the path of least resistance. Make bad behavior harder. Make good behavior easier. This is the rule most people never learn. Now consider Emily. Emily is disciplined, at least on the surface. She tracks her spending. She sets goals. She plans carefully. But she's inconsistent. She's great for a few weeks, then suddenly everything collapses. Emily believes she lacks motivation. The truth is she lacks systems. Emily relies on willpower, and willpower is unreliable. It disappears when you're tired, emotional, or overwhelmed, which is exactly when you need your systems most. Her breakthrough was simple but uncomfortable. She automated everything she could. Savings happened before she saw the money. Bills were paid without thought. Money moved without permission. At first she felt constrained. Then she felt free, because decisions she no longer had to make could no longer exhaust her. Behavior improves dramatically when decisions are removed. Then there's Louise. Louise tells himself he's bad with money. He's said it so many times it feels true. It's part of his identity, and identity is powerful. When someone believes they're bad with money, they unconsciously act in ways that confirm it. They avoid tracking. They procrastinate decisions. They sabotage progress just enough to stay familiar. Luis didn't change his finances by changing his math. He changed them by changing his language. He stopped saying, "I'm bad with money," and started saying, "I'm learning to manage money." That sounds small. It isn't. Identity determines behavior. Behavior determines results. People always act in alignment with who they believe they are. This is why sudden money disappears for so many people. It conflicts with identity, and identity always wins unless it's consciously updated. Behavior also explains why motivation fails. Motivation is emotional. Behavior is mechanical. When people rely on motivation, they succeed only when they feel good. The people who get ahead don't feel motivated more often. They feel structured. They design behavior to work even when they don't want to. Here's what this looks like in real life. They don't keep money in checking where it's easy to spend. They don't wait until the end of the month to save. They don't make spending decisions late at night. They don't rely on memory for bills or goals. They reduce friction. And this is the actionable shift most people miss. Stop asking, "How do I be more disciplined?" Start asking, "How do I make discipline unnecessary?" Put savings out of reach. Put spending limits in place before temptation. Put reminders where emotion usually wins. Behavior doesn't change because you want it to. It changes because the environment changes. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't fail financially because they don't know what to do. They fail because they keep trying to fight themselves instead of designing around themselves. You don't need to become someone new. You need to build systems that support the person you already are. This is where people finally start to feel relief, not because money suddenly appears, but because they stop fighting an internal war every day. Behavior stops being a battle. It becomes a process. And once behavior is aligned, progress becomes predictable. Because money doesn't respond to promises. It responds to patterns. And patterns can be changed, but only when you stop blaming yourself for having them. Leverage is one of those words people hear often but rarely understand. It sounds technical, financial, abstract. And because it sounds abstract, most people assume it's something reserved for investors or business owners. Something that comes later. Something they'll learn if they ever get there. But leverage isn't advanced. It's foundational. And the absence of it explains why so many hardworking people feel exhausted and stuck. Take Alex again. Alex wakes up early and goes to bed tired. He works hard enough that no one could accuse him of laziness. He picks up extra shifts when he can. He takes side work when it's available. He is constantly doing something productive, and yet every month feels fragile. If Alex misses a week of work, everything tightens. If an unexpected expense appears, panic sets in. Not because Alex is careless, but because his entire financial life resets to zero every morning. This is the trap of trading time for money. Time for money work isn't bad, it's necessary. It's how most people start. But it has a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. And when income is tied directly to presence, absence becomes terrifying. Alex didn't understand this until the week he got sick. Nothing dramatic, just enough time away from work to notice how fast things unraveled. No income coming in, bills still moving out, stress rising daily. That's when the rule became visible. Leverage is anything that continues producing value when you step away. Most people don't lack work ethic. They lack leverage. Now contrast Alex with someone like Jamie. Jamie works fewer hours than Alex. On paper, it doesn't make sense. Jamie doesn't hustle as hard, doesn't grind constantly, yet Jamie's financial life feels calmer, more stable. The difference isn't luck, it's structure. Jamie built something small years ago. Nothing flashy, a repeatable service, a simple system, something that brings in money whether Jamie is actively working on it that day or not. Jamie still works, but not every dollar requires maximum effort. That's leverage. Leverage shows up in many forms: skills that get paid more over time, systems that automate decisions, content that keeps working after it's created, businesses that don't collapse when the owner takes a day off. The rule is simple. If your income requires your presence every time, your freedom is limited. This is why raises often don't change lives. They increase income, but they don't change structure. They make the same system slightly bigger, not different. People think leverage is risky because they confuse it with recklessness. But avoiding leverage is often the riskiest choice of all. When you avoid leverage, you rely entirely on your health, your schedule, and your ability to keep going forever. That's not safety. That's dependency. This is where information matters. Leverage doesn't require quitting your job. It doesn't require huge capital. It requires intention. It requires asking a different question. Instead of asking, how can I work more? Ask, how can I separate effort from income, even slightly? Alex didn't quit his job. He didn't gamble. He carved out 1 hour a day. One. Not to rest, not to escape. To build something repeatable. At first it felt slow, almost pointless. Progress was invisible. But that hour didn't reset to zero. Each day built on the last. That's leverage beginning to form. Leverage grows quietly. It's boring in the early stages. This is why most people abandon it. There's no immediate reward, no praise, no validation. But then something shifts. That 1 hour begins to produce results that don't disappear overnight. A client returns. Content gets shared. A system becomes smoother. The work compounds. And suddenly Alex isn't just working harder, he's working differently. Now here's where people get confused. They think leverage means doing less work. It doesn't. It means doing work that lasts. The wealthy are not lazy. They are selective. They put effort into things that stack. This is where informational clarity matters. Leverage falls into a few broad categories: skills, systems, assets, distribution. Skills increase your earning power per hour: communication, sales, technical ability, problem solving. Systems reduce decision-making and automate behavior. Automatic savings, recurring offers, repeatable processes. Assets produce value over time: content, products, investments, businesses. Distribution gets value in front of people: platforms, networks, audiences. You don't need all of these. You need one, built consistently. This is where people go wrong. They try to build everything at once. They scatter effort. Nothing compounds. Jamie didn't build 5 things. Jamie built one thing and refined it. Alex almost quit several times. The early stage felt humiliating, slow, unimpressive. But quitting would have reset progress to zero. That's the hidden cost people don't talk about. Restarting feels productive. Continuing feels boring. Wealth is built by those who continue. Now let's bring behavior back into this. Leverage requires delayed gratification. And delayed gratification feels uncomfortable in a world designed for immediate relief. This is why people say they want freedom, but spend every spare moment escaping discomfort instead of building leverage. The action here isn't dramatic. Choose one leverage path. 1. Commit to it for 90 days. Not to succeed, to build momentum. Protect that time like it matters, because it does. Don't measure results daily. Measure consistency weekly. And understand this: leverage always feels slow until it doesn't. By the time it feels obvious, it's already been working for a long time. This is why people say things like, "You got lucky," when someone finally breaks through. They didn't see the quiet years. They saw the moment it became visible. Leverage doesn't make life perfect, but it makes it resilient. And resilience is the difference between surviving and building. Risk is one of the most misunderstood ideas in money. Most people think risk is something you either take or avoid, something dramatic, something dangerous. They picture gambling, quitting jobs, going all in on ideas that could collapse overnight. And because that picture feels frightening, they choose the opposite. They choose safety, or at least what feels like safety. Take Linda. Linda did everything right. At least everything she was told was right. She chose a stable job. She stayed loyal. She avoided big moves. She didn't rock the boat. When opportunities appeared that felt uncertain, she passed. Better not to risk what she had. For a long time, Linda felt proud of this. Responsible, mature. Then the world changed. Her company restructured. Roles shifted. Budgets tightened. Suddenly, the job that had felt safe for years felt fragile. And Linda realized something unsettling. She had spent a decade avoiding risk, only to end up facing it anyway. But now she faced it without leverage, without alternative income, without skills she had practiced recently. The rule revealed itself too late. There is no such thing as no risk. There is only chosen risk and unchosen risk. Avoiding risk does not eliminate it, it postpones it. And postponed risk often arrives larger and louder. Now compare Linda to someone like Chris. Chris didn't take reckless risks. He didn't gamble his savings or quit impulsively, but he did something most people don't. He took small, intentional risks early while the stakes were low. Chris invested time in learning skills that weren't required for his job. He started projects that might fail. He made offers that could be rejected. He accepted discomfort while his life was still relatively stable. At the time, it didn't look impressive. It looked unnecessary. Years later, when the world shifted, Chris wasn't calm because he was fearless. He was calm because he had options. That's what the rule of risk is really about. Risk isn't about danger, it's about exposure. And the biggest risk most people take is putting all of their exposure in one place. One job, one income stream, one skill set, one version of themselves. That's not safety, that's concentration. The world rewards diversification, but most people only apply that idea to investments, not to themselves. They diversify portfolios, but not skills. They diversify accounts, but not income sources. They diversify entertainment, but not leverage. Linda thought safety meant staying still. Chris understood safety meant adaptability. This is where information matters. There are risks that shrink you and risks that grow you. Shrinking risks feel comfortable in the moment. They keep things familiar, but they reduce future options. Growing risks feel uncomfortable now, but they expand capacity over time. Learning a new skill is a risk. It might not pay off immediately. Making an offer is a risk. Someone might say no. Speaking up is a risk. You might be judged. Building something on the side is a risk. It might fail. But these risks have a limit. The downside is embarrassment, wasted time, or small financial cost. The upside is leverage, confidence, and optionality. Most people never evaluate risk this way. They only ask, what if it goes wrong? They never ask, what if it goes right? Or more importantly, what if I don't try at all? Linda didn't fail because she was irresponsible. She failed because she misidentified risk. She avoided visible risk and absorbed invisible risk instead. Now here's where behavior comes back into the picture. People don't avoid risk because they're logical. They avoid it because of fear, fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty. And fear always exaggerates downside while minimizing upside. That's why small risks feel huge and big risks feel normal once you're used to them. Chris didn't eliminate fear. He practiced acting alongside it. He didn't wait until he felt confident. He let confidence grow from repetition. This is the actionable shift most people miss. Stop asking whether something is risky. Start asking what kind of risk it is. Does this risk increase my skills? Does this risk expand my options? Does this risk make me more adaptable? If the answer is yes, it's likely a growth risk. If the risk only preserves comfort at the expense of progress, it's probably a shrinking risk. The goal isn't to become reckless. The goal is to become intentional. Start small. Risk time before you risk money. Risk learning before you risk income. Risk effort before you risk stability. This is how people quietly reposition their lives. Chris didn't flip his life upside down. He added layers. Layers of skill, layers of optionality, layers of confidence. Linda waited for certainty. Certainty never arrived. And this is the part people don't like to hear. Certainty is the reward for action, not the prerequisite. Those who wait to feel safe before moving often discover that safety only appears after movement. Risk, when chosen deliberately, is not chaos. It's investment. And when you understand the rule of risk, fear stops being a stop sign. It becomes information. People like to believe discipline is a personality trait, that some people simply have it and others don't. It's a comforting belief because it removes responsibility. If discipline is something you're born with, then struggling isn't your fault. But discipline is rarely the reason people succeed. Design is. Take Rachel. Rachel is the kind of person others describe as disciplined. She pays her bills on time. She saves consistently. She rarely makes impulsive purchases. From the outside, it looks like willpower. From the inside, it looks very different. Rachel doesn't rely on motivation. She doesn't wake up every day and choose to be responsible. She made a series of decisions years ago that removed the need to decide at all. Her savings move automatically, the same day her paycheck arrives. Bills are paid without her seeing the money sit in her account. Spending accounts are separated, so she never has to wonder what's available. Rachel doesn't fight temptation. She rarely encounters it. Now compare her to Jason. Jason tries hard. Every month he tells himself this will be the month he gets serious. He opens a spreadsheet. He sets goals. He promises to be disciplined. And for a while he is. Then life happens. A stressful week. A long day. An unexpected expense. Jason's system requires him to constantly make good decisions, and eventually decision fatigue wins. Jason believes he lacks discipline. The truth is, Jason lacks systems. This is the rule most people never learn. If your financial health depends on you making good decisions every day, it will eventually fail. Humans are not designed for constant restraint. We are designed for habit and environment. When behavior is easy, it repeats. When it's hard, it fades. Systems remove friction. Willpower fights it. Most people treat money management like a test of character. The people who get ahead treat it like engineering. Rachel engineered her financial life so that the right things happen by default. Jason tried to muscle his way through complexity. Here's where information matters. A system is anything that produces a predictable outcome without requiring constant attention. Automatic transfers, preset rules, separate accounts with clear purposes, fixed routines that don't depend on mood. People resist systems because they think systems limit freedom. At first they do, but only temporarily. In reality, systems protect freedom by preventing chaos. Think about how many decisions the average person makes about money every day. Can I afford this? Should I buy that? Will this mess things up later? Those questions drain energy. Rachel rarely asks those questions. Her system already answered them. Jason asked them constantly. And here's the quiet cost no one talks about. Decision fatigue doesn't just affect money. It spills into health, relationships, and work. When mental energy is drained, everything suffers. This is why people who get it together financially often experience improvements in other areas of life. Not because money fixes everything, but because systems reduce cognitive load. Now let's bring Alex back into the story. Alex tried to build leverage, but kept falling off track. Not because he didn't care, because his days were chaotic. He tried to work on his side project whenever he felt motivated. Motivation rarely showed up. What changed everything for Alex wasn't inspiration, it was scheduling. He chose 1 hour, same time, same place, same trigger, every weekday, no negotiation. That hour became a system. At first, Alex hated it. It felt restrictive. Over time, it felt stabilizing. His progress became predictable, and predictability breeds confidence. Systems don't make life exciting. They make progress inevitable. This is the actionable shift most people miss. Stop asking how to be more motivated. Start asking how to make progress unavoidable. If saving requires effort, automate it. If spending happens impulsively, add friction. If building leverage keeps getting delayed, schedule it like a meeting you can't cancel. People often say, "I'll start once I feel ready." Systems removed the need to feel ready. Rachel didn't feel ready when she automated her finances. She felt anxious, then relieved, then calm. Jason kept waiting for the right moment. The right moment never arrived. Here's another story that illustrates this. Tom and Megan earn similar incomes. Tom feels constantly stressed. Megan feels steady. The difference is not intelligence, it's structure. Tom keeps everything in one account. Megan separates money by purpose. Bills have an account. Spending has an account. Savings has an account. Growth has an account. Tom negotiates with himself constantly. Megan rarely negotiates at all. Tom believes Megan is disciplined. Megan knows she just removed temptation. This is the heart of the rule of systems. You don't rise to your intentions, you fall to your systems. If your system is weak, your outcomes will be inconsistent. If your system is strong, progress continues even when life gets messy. People resist systems because they associate them with control imposed from the outside. But the most powerful systems are self-imposed. They are not cages. They are guardrails. And guardrails don't limit where you can go. They prevent you from going off the cliff. When people finally understand this rule, shame disappears. They stop blaming themselves for being human. They stop trying to become someone else. They start designing life for who they actually are. And once systems are in place, something unexpected happens. Discipline feels lighter. Progress feels calmer. Money becomes quieter. And that quiet is powerful because it frees your attention for the next rule. Identity. There's a strange thing that happens right before many people finally start making progress. They hesitate, not because things are going badly, but because things are starting to work. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it shows up in small decisions, skipped routines, looser boundaries, a quiet return to old habits, and from the outside, it makes no sense. Why would someone sabotage progress they've worked so hard to build? The answer has very little to do with money. It has everything to do with identity. Consider Olivia. Olivia spent most of her adult life thinking of herself as bad with money. Not dramatically bad, just someone who never quite had it together. Late starts, restarts, good intentions followed by drift. When she finally began putting systems in place, things improved faster than she expected. Her account balances stopped dipping into panic territory. Bills felt manageable. For the first time in years, she wasn't bracing herself every month, and that's when the discomfort started. Not financial discomfort, psychological discomfort. Olivia didn't know who she was without the stress. The routines that had helped her survive no longer fit the life she was building. The internal story she'd been telling herself for years, about struggling, about barely making it, about always catching up, no longer matched reality. And that mismatch created tension. Humans are deeply loyal to their identity, even when it hurts them. We don't just act based on what we want. We act based on who we believe we are allowed to be. This is why sudden money disappears for some people. Not because they're reckless, but because the new reality clashes with their internal self-image. Subconsciously, they steer back toward what feels familiar. Struggle can become familiar. Stress can become normal. Chaos can feel like home. Now think about someone like Marcus. Marcus had always been the responsible one in his family, the one who didn't take risks, the one who stayed steady. That identity served him well early in life. It kept him out of trouble. It kept him stable. But later, it became a ceiling. Opportunities came up that required him to stretch, to ask, to risk rejection, to step outside what felt proper. And every time he hesitated, not because the opportunity was bad, but because it conflicted with who he believed he was. Marcus wasn't lazy. He was loyal to an outdated identity. This is where most advice fails people. It focuses on tactics without addressing self-concept. You can give someone perfect systems, perfect strategies, perfect information, and they will still sabotage progress if it violates their identity. Identity answers a quiet question most people never ask out loud. What kind of person am I? If the answer is someone who struggles, success feels uncomfortable. If the answer is someone who survives, building feels dangerous. If the answer is someone who plays it safe, growth feels irresponsible. Changing identity doesn't happen through affirmations. It happens through evidence. Small, repeated actions that contradict the old story. Olivia didn't wake up one day and decide she was good with money. She noticed that she was paying herself first without thinking, that she was reviewing numbers calmly, that she wasn't avoiding her finances anymore. Her identity shifted because her behavior shifted consistently. Marcus didn't suddenly become bold. He practiced one small behavior that contradicted his old role. He asked for a better rate, then a clearer boundary, then a bigger responsibility. Each action was uncomfortable, but survivable. Identity adjusts when behavior repeats, not all at once, gradually, quietly. This is why identity change often feels anticlimactic. There's no single moment where you transform. There's just a growing sense that your old labels don't fit anymore. Here's the important distinction most people miss. You don't need to decide who you are becoming. You need to stop reinforcing who you no longer are. That means noticing the moments where you default to old language. I'm just not good at this. That's not me. I've always been this way. Those sentences feel harmless. They are not. They are instructions. The actionable shift here is subtle but powerful. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" and ask, "What would someone who manages their life well do here?" Then do the smallest version of that. Identity follows action. This is also why people stall when progress slows. Early wins are exciting. Later growth is quieter. When results become less visible, old identities try to reclaim control. That's when people say things like, "I don't know, I feel off," or "I think I need a break," or "Maybe this isn't for me." What they're really saying is, "This version of me feels unfamiliar," and unfamiliar feels risky. The solution isn't to force confidence, it's to normalize the unfamiliar. Growth always feels awkward before it feels natural. The people who move forward aren't braver. They just tolerate that awkwardness longer. One more story. Ethan spent years chasing financial improvement through information. Books, videos, advice, nothing stuck. When he finally simplified everything down to a few repeatable behaviors, progress came quickly. Then it stalled. Not financially, personally. Ethan realized something uncomfortable. His social circle was built around struggle, complaints, shared stress, bonding over being overwhelmed. His growth quietly separated him from the identity of the group, so he slowed down. Not because he wanted to, but because belonging felt safer than change. This is another layer of identity no one talks about. Sometimes staying stuck is how we stay connected. And moving forward requires finding new reference points. That doesn't mean abandoning people. It means expanding your sense of what's normal. The people who truly change don't just adopt new habits. They adopt new standards. Not overnight, but deliberately. Identity is the rule that locks everything else in place. Systems fail if identity resists them. Leverage stalls if identity shrinks from it. Risk feels impossible if identity demands safety. But when identity shifts, even slightly, everything downstream becomes easier. And the shift doesn't come from thinking differently. It comes from doing differently, long enough that your brain has to update the story. In the next part, we'll change gears again. Less psychology, more real-world dynamics. Because once identity starts to move, the next rule determines how fast progress compounds, and why patience, more than intensity, separates people who build from people who burn out. That's the rule of patience, and it's where most people quit. Most people don't quit because something goes wrong. They quit because nothing seems to be happening. This is the quiet danger zone, the phase no one posts about, the stretch of time where effort continues but visible results slow down or disappear entirely. It's the phase where motivation fades, doubt grows louder, and old habits start whispering again. Patience isn't tested when things are exciting. It's tested when progress becomes ordinary. Take Aaron. Aaron didn't fail at building better money habits. He did the opposite. He tracked, he automated, he reduced spending friction, he built a buffer. He even started developing a skill that could eventually turn into leverage. For the first few months, everything felt encouraging. Numbers improved, stress dropped. There was momentum. Then things leveled out. No dramatic wins, no obvious breakthroughs, just steady behavior and average days. Aaron started to wonder if this was it. The early excitement had tricked him into believing progress would feel linear, up and to the right, but real progress rarely does. It looks more like a flat line for a long time, followed by a sudden shift that only makes sense in hindsight. This is the rule of patience. Compounding is invisible until it isn't. Most people intellectually understand compounding. They've heard the examples, the graphs, the metaphors, but emotionally they don't trust it because it requires sustained belief without constant evidence. And belief without evidence feels naive. So people quit early, not angrily, quietly. They loosen routines. They skip reviews. They tell themselves they'll come back to it later. Later becomes never. Now contrast Aaron with someone like Nina. Nina didn't feel motivated most days. She didn't feel inspired. What she felt was calm commitment. She treated her financial routines like brushing her teeth, not something she questioned daily, just something she did. Nina understood something Aaron hadn't yet. Patience isn't waiting, it's continuing. She didn't measure progress by excitement. She measured it by stability. Fewer surprises, less stress, more predictability. When something went wrong, she didn't spiral. She adjusted. That adjustment mindset is where patience lives. People who lack patience expect effort to remove uncertainty quickly. People who have patience expect uncertainty to persist and build anyway. This difference matters because impatience causes people to abandon strategies that are working simply because they aren't dramatic. Now let's shift perspective for a moment. Think about how most things that matter actually grow. Relationships, trust, skills, health. None of them transform overnight. And yet, when it comes to money, people expect acceleration without endurance. Why? Because the world rewards speed in visible ways. Quick wins, viral success, overnight stories. Those stories distort expectations. They make steady progress feel like failure. This is why the rule of patience isn't motivational. It's corrective. It resets expectations. Aaron's breakthrough didn't come from trying harder. It came from redefining success. Instead of asking, "Is this working?" he started asking, "Is this still aligned?" That question changed his behavior. He stopped looking for spikes and started looking for trends. And trends only reveal themselves over time. Here's an important informational point most people never hear. Patience is not passive, it is active restraint. It's the ability to keep doing the right thing when easier, more tempting options appear. It's the ability to delay gratification, not because you're denying yourself, but because you trust the process you're in. This is why patience is closely tied to systems. Systems carry you when emotion fluctuates. Nina didn't wake up patient. She built routines that removed the need to feel patient. Her actions continued whether she felt like it or not. Aaron relied on feeling like progress was happening. Nina relied on process. That difference compounds. Another story illustrates this clearly. Jason and Leo started at the same time. Same income, same goals, same basic plan. Jason wanted results quickly. He optimized constantly. He changed strategies often. He chased whatever seemed to be working fastest. Leo chose boring consistency. He stuck to a simple plan and refined it slowly. 6 months in, Jason was ahead. He felt validated. Leo felt unsure. A year in, Jason was exhausted. Leo was steady. 2 years in, Jason had restarted multiple times. Leo had built something durable. Patience didn't make Leo faster in the beginning. It made him unstoppable over time. Here's the actionable shift hidden inside this rule. Stop asking how long it will take. Start asking whether what you're doing is sustainable. If you can't imagine maintaining a habit for years, it won't compound. If a plan requires constant excitement, it will collapse under boredom. Patience favors simplicity. This is why people who succeed financially often sound underwhelming when they explain what they did, because the explanation doesn't capture the endurance. I just kept doing it. That's not laziness, that's mastery. Another angle most people miss is that impatience often disguises fear. Fear that you're wasting time. Fear that you chose the wrong path. Fear that you'll look foolish for sticking with something too long. So people quit early to avoid that discomfort. But quitting early guarantees wasted effort. The irony is painful. Aaron eventually noticed something else. His life felt calmer, even though his income hadn't dramatically changed yet. Emergencies felt smaller. Decisions felt clearer. Stress wasn't dominating his thinking. That calm was the compounding at work. It just wasn't financial yet. And here's the part that matters. Patience allows secondary benefits to emerge before primary ones. Better sleep, better focus, better decisions. Those secondary benefits are what eventually create primary results. Nina didn't just get wealthier over time. She got more capable. Capability compounds faster than money. This is why the rule of patience sits near the end of the process. You can't shortcut it. You can only violate it. And most people do, right before things start working. In the next part, we'll change pace again. We'll zoom out and look at direction, how all of these rules work together, and why clarity, more than motivation or intensity, determines where people end up. Because at some point, patience stops being about waiting and starts being about choosing the right direction to stay in. At some point, patience alone stops being enough. Not because patience failed, but because patience without direction can turn into endurance in the wrong lane. You can be consistent, disciplined, and committed, and still end up somewhere you never intended to go. This is where direction quietly takes over. Direction is not the same as goals. Goals are destinations. Direction is the path you walk every day without thinking about it. Most people don't choose their direction. They inherit it from family, from peers, from circumstance, from whatever felt necessary at the time. That's how people wake up 10 years into a life they didn't consciously design. Take Ben. Ben is steady, reliable, consistent. He's the kind of person who doesn't miss payments and doesn't make impulsive decisions. From the outside, he looks like someone who has it together. But Ben feels restless, not unhappy, not desperate, just quietly unsatisfied. He can't point to a single thing that's wrong, which makes the feeling harder to explain. Everything works, but nothing excites. Ben's patience kept him stable, but it also kept him moving in a direction he never questioned. He stayed in a role because it was safe. He kept spending patterns because they were familiar. He postponed bigger decisions because nothing was urgent enough to force them. Urgency never came. Years passed anyway. Contrast that with Maya. Maya didn't have a dramatic plan. She didn't map out her life in advance. What she did have was a clear sense of what she didn't want to repeat. She didn't want constant financial anxiety. She didn't want decisions made under pressure. She didn't want to feel trapped by past choices. So she chose a direction, not a destination. Her direction was simple: fewer reactions, more control. Every decision filtered through that lens. Not just money decisions, time decisions, career decisions, social decisions. When something reduced control, she questioned it. When something increased control, she leaned in. That direction shaped her life quietly, without dramatic moves. This is how direction actually works. It's not about knowing exactly where you'll end up. It's about knowing what you're optimizing for. Ben optimized for stability without realizing it. Maya optimized for optionality. Both were patient. Only one was intentional. Here's where information matters again. Direction is revealed by what you repeatedly tolerate. What you tolerate financially becomes your baseline. What you tolerate emotionally becomes your norm. What you tolerate structurally becomes your future. People often think direction is chosen in big moments. In reality, it's chosen in small allowances. Ben tolerated mild dissatisfaction because it felt safer than disruption. Maya tolerated temporary discomfort because it moved her toward control. Neither choice felt dramatic in the moment. One compounded quietly. This is the point where many people feel resistance. They think choosing direction means making huge sacrifices or bold declarations. It doesn't. It means deciding what you're no longer willing to drift through unconsciously. Direction becomes clear when you ask better questions. Not what should I do, but what pattern am I reinforcing right now? Not is this safe, but does this move me toward or away from control? Not will this make me happy, but will this make my future easier or harder to manage? Those questions don't require perfect answers. They require honesty. Maya didn't change everything at once. She made directional adjustments. She simplified finances to reduce noise. She chose skills that increased flexibility. She declined commitments that limited her options. Over time, her life felt lighter. Not because it was easier, but because it was aligned. Ben eventually noticed the gap, not in his bank account, but in his energy. He felt tired in a way rest didn't fix. That was the signal he'd been ignoring. Stability without direction can feel like standing still on a moving walkway, going the wrong way. You're working just to avoid falling behind. Direction changes that. Direction doesn't eliminate problems. It gives them context. A difficult decision feels different when you know why you're making it. Sacrifice feels different when it supports a direction you chose consciously. This is why motivation becomes less important once direction is clear. You don't need constant inspiration when you know where you're headed. You just need alignment. Here's the quiet, actionable truth hidden inside this rule. You don't need to know your entire future. You need to know what you are building away from and what you are building toward. Away from chaos, toward control, away from reaction, toward design, away from fragility, toward resilience. Direction sharpens patience. Patience sustains direction. Together, they do what intensity never could. They make progress inevitable. And once direction is set, something interesting happens. Decisions get easier. Boundaries feel clearer. Distractions lose power, not because you're stronger, but because the path is narrower. In the next part, we'll bring everything together and talk about what happens when people finally stop trying to fix money in isolation and start treating it as part of a larger system. Life, energy, time, and attention moving together. Because money never exists alone. And the people who understand that stop fighting it altogether. There's a point where money stops being the main issue. People don't notice it at first because they're so used to treating money as the problem. But eventually, if they've been paying attention, something clicks. The stress they use to blame on money doesn't disappear when numbers improve. It changes shape. It reveals itself as something broader. Time, energy, attention. Money was just the loudest signal. This is where everything you've heard so far begins to merge. Consider what happened to Maya after a few years of living with direction instead of reaction. Her finances were calmer, yes, but more importantly, her days felt different, less rushed, less scattered. She wasn't constantly switching contexts, constantly responding, constantly catching up. She hadn't optimized her life to feel impressive. She had optimized it to feel manageable. That distinction matters more than most people realize. When money improves but life remains chaotic, people often self-sabotage without understanding why. They spend impulsively, they overcommit, they drift back into noise. Not because they want to, but because chaos still feels familiar. The real shift happens when order spreads, not rigid order, functional order. This is where money stops being isolated and becomes integrated. Integrated with how you spend your days. Integrated with how you protect your energy. Integrated with how you say yes and no. Most people try to fix money without fixing the environment money lives inside. They upgrade income but not boundaries. They build savings but not focus. They reduce debt but not overwhelm. So the relief never lasts. Take Aaron again. After months of steady habits, his finances were stable, but he still felt drained. He couldn't understand why. On paper, things were better. Then he noticed something uncomfortable. He was still living like someone in survival mode. Every spare moment was filled. Every silence was avoided. Every open space was consumed with stimulation. He was spending less money, but he was still spending attention recklessly. And attention is where money goes next. Attention shapes decisions. Decisions shape outcomes. Aaron realized he needed fewer inputs, not more effort. He simplified his information diet, stopped consuming financial advice obsessively, chose one plan and committed to it. He reduced options, not ambition. As his attention stabilized, so did his decisions. This is the layer most people never reach. They fix behaviors, but not inputs. They build systems, but not margins. They create structure, but not space. And space is where clarity lives. Money behaves differently in a calm environment, not magically, predictably. When days are designed instead of improvised, spending slows. When energy is protected, impulsivity fades. When attention is focused, leverage compounds. This is why people who appear good with money often seem calm in general. The calm came first, or at least alongside. The integration isn't about becoming minimalist or extreme. It's about coherence. Your money, time, energy, and goals should not be fighting each other. If earning more requires burning out, something is misaligned. If saving money requires constant deprivation, something is unsustainable. If building leverage destroys relationships or health, the cost is too high. The people who build durable wealth don't optimize one area at the expense of all others. They balance momentum with maintenance. This is where the rules you've heard stop being separate ideas and start forming a system. Behavior sets the baseline. Systems stabilize behavior. Leverage multiplies effort. Risk expands options. Patience allows compounding. Direction keeps everything aligned. Miss one, and the structure wobbles. This is also why progress doesn't look impressive in the early stages. Integrated systems are quiet. They don't announce themselves. They don't create dramatic stories. They create boring reliability, and boring reliability is the foundation of freedom. One last story brings this together. There's a man named Thomas who spent most of his life feeling like he was always preparing to live, preparing to relax, preparing to feel secure, preparing to finally enjoy things. Years passed in preparation. Then in his 40s, he noticed something painful. He had built competence without coherence, skills without space, income without control. So he did something simple but difficult. He stopped adding. He didn't chase more strategies. He didn't pursue more opportunities. He didn't look for the next thing. He consolidated. He reduced obligations, clarified priorities, designed his days around energy instead of urgency. He aligned money with life instead of treating it as a separate battle. Progress didn't explode. It stabilized. And that stability gave him something he'd never had before. Presence. Presence in decisions. Presence in relationships. Presence in his own life. This is the quiet outcome no one advertises. Financial progress is not about domination or excess. It's about removing friction between who you are and how you live. When money stops fighting your life, it starts supporting it. And that's when the rules finally feel fair. Not because the system changed, but because you learned how to move within it consciously. This is not the end of the journey. It's the point where the struggle phase ends. From here, growth becomes less about force and more about refinement. Less about fixing, more about maintaining. Less about escape, more about direction. And once you reach that point, you realize something important. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were never bad with money. You were just never shown the rules. And now that you see them, you don't have to fight anymore. You just have to keep going, intentionally, calmly, in the direction you chose.